I want to first thank the Academy for the invitation to speak today. I want to also thank them for allowing me to be me and not be up here in a suit and tie, because this lecture doesn't really fit that. What I want to talk to you today about is there are materials out there for prototyping we don't often think about. We get so tied up in our everyday lives, and in getting ready for this, I thought of two quotes. The first one being, let's see, we are not advancing. Okay, so I need a little help out here. Oh, there we go. There they got it set up. So first off, I have a couple of disclosures. One is I'm out here today to have a lot of fun, but the other is there is a number of things I'll mention. None of them have endorsed what I'm doing, and so just some full disclosure, because I'm sure a number of you have to disclose all the time. But I want to mention two particular quotes. The first is from Thomas Edison. He said, "The greatest invention in the world is the mind of a child." And I think we would all agree with that, because if you think back to when you were children, much like my person here in the picture, everybody built things out of things that weren't meant to be built out of. We all had cardboard box forts. We all had basically sofa cushion forts. I can remember as a child, every stick, even though it may be inappropriate now, was a gun or a rifle when we played way back in the day. But then we grew up. And Carl Sagan had a very nice quote. It was that basically every kid starts out as a natural-born scientist, and then we beat it out of them. And so what I want to talk to you today about is that basically if we think about the difference between what's an invention and what's an innovation, it really comes down to how simple is it. So simply put, an invention is just something new. And this dates me a little bit for those of you who don't know who the Three Stooges are, but one of their most famous skits was inventing a pen that would ride under whipped cream. Sounds kind of fun, but on the other hand, how practical is it? So an innovation, on the other hand, is something that solves a problem. We're trying to correct something or make something easier, or just finding a new way to do things. And invention and innovation obviously go together. So in the scientific world, we have people trying to now teach us to go back to making things simple, and that would be our good friends at NSF with I-Course. And basically, there are two important things that I took away from I-Corp when I went through it, and I've been through it a couple of times. The first is a solution is only a solution if it solves the problem. If you come up with something more complex, doesn't matter how good it is, if it doesn't solve the problem, it ain't going to be used. The other is we shouldn't go about creating a solution and then going and looking for the problem. When I went through I-Corps, a number of people were there. They had the greatest things in the world, and yet by the end of the period that you go through in I-Corps, I don't know how many of you have done that, but at the end of the period, they all came back and went, well, we have a solution and we have no problem. So basically, what are we looking for a solution to? We're looking to solve that person's pain point, as they put it in I-Corps, that basically you identify what's costing them more money, what's costing them more time. So the idea is for whatever you do, make it quicker, make it more cost effective. It's going to come out of the university and then into public use, and that's what we should all be aiming for. So, we do a lot of prototyping. I'm sure everybody in this room has built more than one prototype. And if you look up the definition of what a prototype really is, according to Webster's dictionary, it's an original model on which something is patterned. So you've come up with an idea, you've built it. And then the other part, which to me is much more important, a first full-scale and useful functional form of a new type or design of a construction. So you built something that works. Now, there's a difference between what we call prototyping and what other people call their first practical application of a device. When you're working with industry, they want that first actual usable model. Well, prototyping just is to prove a concept in a lot of cases, but we should be aiming as we prototype to move things from what we do in the laboratory, because I will tell you some of the prototypes we built, yeah, a lot of styrofoam, a lot of duct tape are involved before we get finished. And so what we should be aiming for is something we can scale that can actually eventually be that first viable product. So I want to give you an example from my own world. I'm a reproductive physiologist by trade. So I work with a lot of sperm and eggs, and we have a lot of issues in our industry because, as I like to tell people, it was the wild, wild west when we started. If you could dream it, you could do it, but a lot of it didn't work. And one of the biggest issues in our world is that we need to find a way to judge embryos. And we need to find a way that is non-invasive, because we have techniques right now, but basically you shoot a laser at the embryo, you harvest some of the tissue, and you go try to find out things about it. Well, there's some issues with that. One is, if you hit something with a laser, you might actually damage it. But there are other things that make this where we want to actually do this. One is healthy embryos make babies. Dead embryos, they don't do a whole lot. So what we're trying to do, and we're aiming at both humans and animals when we do this, in the animal world, what we're trying to do is make this more cost effective. So when we bring the technologies we have into animal reproduction, they're already expensive. Anything we can do to lower it makes them more usable across the board. In the human world, we're trying to lower what can be a $20,000, $30,000 procedure, at least by a few $1,000s. Now, we came up with a way of doing this based on buoyancy. So what we found is that normal embryos, they have this bell-shaped curve, almost perfect bell-shaped curve, where the healthiest embryos tend to drop in the middle of the curve. Dead embryos, they drop at the extreme. They're either very light or they're very heavy. Now, to do this originally, we went out, we designed a system. We needed $38,000 of equipment, which luckily we got a grant for, and we came up with this system that you see here. You'll notice our very fancy holding system there for our chamber. It's a wooden block with a hole drilled in it. But the microscope was expensive, all the other equipment was expensive, and having a wooden block, it moves around a lot, so we had to do a lot of adjustment, and very bulky equipment. The stage of the microscope sits on is about 50 pounds, so yeah, you don't get a whole lot of movement out of this. So the translation is here, we came up with a great solution, but it doesn't answer the pain point. We can't take this to the field. We can't make it work very effectively. So we went back to the drawing board, and we use a lot of things in our world. In fact, we use 3D printer. 3D printer is great. Only problem is you have to know what you want when you 3D print, and reprinting takes time. It's expensive. It's not as expensive as building things other ways, but it's still expensive, so we still didn't answer the pain point. But one day I was sitting around the lab, and as I normally do, you might look at these items here. All of those have ended up in a prototype for one of my patents. And the one we used in this case was Legos. We came up with a system, a holding system, and a little kid's pen microscope that was available for very cheap money. So altogether we spent about $100, and it now hooks into the microscope and into the computer. So we have a $100 device instead of a $38,000 device. We can do the same things, so we've eliminated the time. It's adjusted from the moment we do it. We have all these things. We have finally answered the pain point. And because we built this out of something simple, out of Legos, we can take absolute measurements now, and we can build that prototype with the 3D printer because I know what shape it needs to be now. So lots and lots of advantages of using very simple things. Legos in this case, foam in other cases. We've used that igloo cooler you might have seen in the previous slide, and actually an organ transplant system we were helping with. So toys can be a great advantage. What has the experience taught us? One is prototyping is only limited by imagination. I look at potentially everything. When I walk into a Walmart or a Harbor Freight, I'm looking at everything as potentially inexpensive prototyping materials, and it works that you can use those not only in your own prototyping, but we're trying to spread this out to communities that don't necessarily have all the advantages we do at the university. I live in an area where the school systems may have 12 people graduating in a graduating class. They're not going to have access to all the things you might have in a scientific laboratory, but I can teach them to prototype with these toys. It works really efficiently. So now I want to finish Carl Sagan's thought. Carl Sagan's thought was every kid starts out as a natural-born scientist, and then we beat it out of them. But here's the part I didn't add in the beginning. A few trickle through the system with their wonder and enthusiasm for science intact. In my world, that is everybody sitting in this room. That's what makes us innovators, and that's what makes us capable of changing the world. So don't forget about the child. The child inside you still has a lot to teach you. Learn from them, learn from their toys. In my own case, this is the next thing that I'm going to tear apart. I can tell you what I'm going to build out of it, but my IP person is sitting back. He's on the next panel. He will make me kill you if I tell you what I want to do. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. I've got about a minute if anybody has any questions. If not, I thank you for your attention.